Hard truth I wish I knew sooner. Some people don't love you. They just love the benefits that come with you. And the fastest way to weed them out is to set boundaries and observe whose behavior changes. And a funny thing happens when we start to prioritize our needs and please ourselves. Some people in our lives will become displeased, as you having weak boundaries highly benefited them. At one point in my life, almost everyone in it was taking from me, and I was letting them. Some drained my energy, some drained my bank account, some drained my confidence. As a recovering codependent and people pleaser, I didn't know how to all of a sudden set boundaries and new rules with these people without pissing them off. And a wise mentor of mine said to me, "So to avoid upsetting people, Tiffany, you're willing to sacrifice your life and well-being?" Well, dang, when she put it that way. This is exactly why, as your coach, I will always give it to you straight, as the tough truths and wisdom are what we need to hear, not always what we want to hear. If you stating your clear priorities, needs, desires, and limitations make people upset and leave you, then they never loved you to begin with. They loved what you did for them or what they could get from you. I brought on an incredible expert in dysfunctional dynamics and relationships onto the show today. Laura K. Connell has been featured in numerous major publications, everything from the Toronto Star to the Globe to Chicken Soup for the Soul. She's an incredible writer and has a knack for being able to explain your role in all forms of relationships in your life, from career to your relationship with yourself, to intimacy, to your childhood. And her new book is coming out, that's published by Simon & Schuster. It's Not Your Fault, coming soon this year, which I'll be really excited to share with you. If you're tired of hearing the same old basic mindset and motivational fluff talk, you've come to the right show. Welcome to ProjectME with Tiffany Carter, the podcast, where we dish on everything from managing that crazy brain of yours to manifesting abundance to my straightforward, actionable steps that will make you major money online. Now, I'm not your typical multimillionaire entrepreneur. It takes a small village to keep my anxiety and depression in check. I'm inherently disorganized with an intense obsession with office supplies. Your girl here is a digital marketing content expert who's generated over $200 million in sales. I promise by tuning in twice a week, you will get a much needed refreshing dose of truth, clarity, and cash making advice. Now let's get to it. Not too late, you didn't wait too long, you're not too old, the industry isn't already too saturated. Here are the straight up facts. The online coaching and education industry is set to reach $325 billion by 2025 and continue to exponentially grow from there. You only need a micro percentage of that to make 5 figures a day. What would be the mistake is if you continue to toe dip and not monetize your passions, not monetize your talents, your intellectual property, and get in the game now. And if you're like, I don't know how to do that, I don't know where to begin, I've maybe started, but I'm not really getting anywhere, I'm not having any consistency or any major growth, then you need to pop into the ProjectME Posse Business Coaching membership. There's a reason this is world famous, and this has helped hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people scale their businesses to $300,000 plus a year. Now, if you're someone who's already making over $15,000 a month, I would recommend that you apply for my 2-month private business coaching program or go get on the wait list for my mastermind. That'd be a better fit for you to scale past that point. But if you're between 0 and 15,000 a month, you're crazy for not getting in here for $3.33 a day. All of the details, all the testimonials, all of the stuff is in the link inside the show notes. There's a special flash sale going on right now, and I've added an additional option where you get 2 months for free. So this is an absolute no-brainer for your business. Even many of my private clients will also be in the posse just so they have that additional accountability every single week where there's live trainings, and we have open entrepreneurial support discussions for all of the meltdowns and the realities of what it takes and how uncomfortable it can be to pursue your passion. No one else is doing this. That's why people stay in the posse for many, many years and will not leave. Go check it out. What up, my people, my posse, my fellow crazies? I'm your host, Tiffany Carter. And wow, you are going to be absolutely blown away. I guarantee you're going to learn stuff that you have never heard of in your entire life. Because I remember the first time I learned about the things that we're going to discuss today with my incredible guest. And I felt so validated that I was left speechless. It was so validating. And I'm not talking it up so much to where you're even going to be left disappointed. You're going to agree with me. You're going to share this episode with every single person you know. So I can't wait to get started. As I mentioned her a little bit in the intro, but Laura K. Connell, she was on my friend Andrea's show, Shout Out Adult Child Podcast. She's a trauma-informed author and coach. And her main passion and focus right now is talking about the dysfunctional family roles. So she has a quiz. We'll tell you how to access all the things in the show notes and on her Instagram. But let's get into it right away, Laura K.
Sounds good, Tiffany. I'm happy to be here.
So what would be a good way for people to first understand the concept of a dysfunctional family? Because if I had heard that 20 years ago, if I had heard that, I would have gone, well, like dysfunctional, it's a strong word. Like to me, that might mean like your household had to be a real shit show. Mm-hmm. So how would you help define that for people where that like terminology is new?
Yeah, and the term dysfunctional family has kind of evolved too. So when they very first started talking about it, they were talking about families that had an alcoholic. And that was kind of the definition of the dysfunctional family. But as time has gone on, we know now that you don't have to have an alcoholic in your family for it to be dysfunctional. And there is kind of a joke that every family is dysfunctional, but that's not necessarily true. There are healthy families, and you don't have to be a perfect family to be healthy. But dysfunctional families, what they tend to have in common is that the needs of the adults or the caregivers come before the children. I'd say that's the most common denominator of the dysfunctional family. So if you grew up in one, you might think about how you had to suppress your own needs and wants and kind of look to your parents or caregivers to figure out what do they need and want and how can I make them happy, which is really a role reversal. And that's what causes a lot of our problems as adults, because the ways that we took care of ourselves as children when our parents weren't doing that or not in the way that we needed, as adults, we keep doing those same things and it becomes very maladaptive.
Yeah. I mean, you and I have some similarities with how things have showed up in our adult lives. But I want to give, and I'm always open, as my listeners know, to be really vulnerable. But how about an example from your own life of the dysfunction in your home? What was your role? And then maybe some examples of like how that ended up showing up in your adult life long after you've moved out of that home.
Yeah, absolutely. So as a child, I was very parentified. And if you don't know what that means, it is just that role reversal where instead of the parents meeting your needs, you're meeting the parents' needs, or the parents' needs are coming first. So you become like a little adult almost. So that's why if you look at your childhood and you don't remember really feeling joyful or free or carefree like a child is supposed to, there might be some of that going on. So my mother had some kind of undiagnosed mental illness. And I don't know exactly what it is because it's not been diagnosed, but there was a lot of narcissism, very bad emotional regulation. Like my job was kind of to regulate her emotions. So as a result, I kind of tamped my own emotions down. I never learned to deal with those because I was always kind of helping her with hers, right?
Did
And
she have like did she get super stressed out and have outbursts? And then the next day she'd be like crying and couldn't get out of bed? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, she never had the not being able to get out of bed. She always had the high energy from what I could see anyway. But now that you say that, later on, as I got into like teenagehood, she did start getting into the more depressed phases of staying in bed. And you just reminded me of that actually. But when I was younger, she was higher energy and she just had like explosive anger and anything could set her off. And she never seemed to be happy. And of course, no matter what I did, I couldn't make her happy. And that's all I wanted to do, right? Because when you're little, you just want to win your mother's love. And you do that by just trying to make them happy. You people please, you fawn. And nothing I did worked, which of course was really confusing.
Now, how can you tell the difference if you were trying to meet her needs and you're parentified, or if that parent is a narcissist and you had to put their needs ahead of your own because of that? Is there a difference?
I'm not sure if there is a difference in the way it's felt to the child. No,
yeah, because I never identified as someone who like I was parentified. Like I never, and my mom's a narcissist, and I never identified as that. But the way you defined it, where I had to watch her, make sure she didn't have an outburst, make sure we're really hyper vigilant. Like we got to make sure mom's happy. That was my entire childhood and bled into adulthood. So it does meet that definition.
It absolutely does. And the way you describe your relationship with your mother totally feels the same as mine. And it's funny, I even look at photos of us, like when I was little, and I'm always looking at her and she's never looking at me. And that's just so telling. And I have a very dysfunctional family, but I have one aunt who married into the family and she came from quite a healthy family. And there's photos of her looking at me with love. You just see the love in her eyes, but nobody in my blood family looked at me like that. And it was just a measure of her health that she had that in her to give, right? But my family didn't.
Did you feel alone in childhood? Did you feel?
Absolutely.
God, it was, I mean, were you an only child or did you have siblings?
I have a sibling. She's 3 years younger than me. And I did absolutely feel alone, Tiffany. I felt so alone. I felt I did not have anyone to turn to. I felt I had nowhere to go. I really believe that if I had a problem, I had to solve it myself. I didn't tell anyone about my needs. I don't even know if I knew most of my needs because I'd suppressed them so much. But I have memories of things like being in kindergarten and not asking to go to the bathroom, you know, so even the physical needs were, I just didn't know how to meet them. I didn't know it was okay to ask for what I wanted because at home that was not okay.
Wow. I just had a major, like how something I said brought a memory to the forefront for you.
Mm-hmm.
And to the point where I actually have a little bit of a problem, nothing major now as a result, but holding, like I had to pee, but holding it, I'm talking like could go all day. And that was so, because I had a time when I could do it and not to disrupt her. And I couldn't be the kid like you see in movies where they start driving somewhere and the kid's like, I gotta go pee. Oh, hell no.
I know.
No. That wasn't an option. And then I
Right.
proceeded to even make jokes about it. Like in college and my adult life, like I'd call myself a camel. Like my other
Mhm.
girlfriends would be like, Jesus, don't you like ever pee? And now
Right.
I like have an issue because that's really unhealthy, you guys, for to
Yes.
do that. So I'm thank you for sharing that because there's so many things we do subconsciously that we don't realize are a byproduct of that.
Mhm. Yeah, and to think that such a basic physical need that we would deny ourselves, it really says a lot about how deep this stuff goes, right? And that it sounds like it even kind of changed your constitution because you became like the camel. So you get used to denying yourself, and then it just becomes kind of part of who you are, right?
Yeah, because I didn't know any different. So this is just how it
Mhm.
is. So when you started like dating, started in the working world and stuff like that, how did your dysfunctional childhood start playing out?
Yeah, oh my goodness. So in dating, my first relationship in high school, so later in high school, almost my last year of high school was my first real boyfriend. And the dysfunction that I grew up in, not being allowed to set boundaries, not being allowed to say no, this actually led to sexual abuse. This led to a date rape because I got into this relationship where I would never say no. And so I was just being used and nobody was protecting me. And I couldn't fathom saying no because, in my experience, if you say no, the consequences are so dire, like it's rejection, it's getting cut off, it's being abandoned. So all those things in my subconscious, because I don't remember saying to myself, you can't say no because then he's going to leave you. It's just all subconscious, right? I literally didn't know how to say no. I really didn't. I didn't think that I could. I didn't know how to do it. And so eventually in that relationship, I ended up getting date raped. Like he raped me, and there's no other way to say it. And I continued to date him after that.
Mm.
Part of that is the time that we were in because I'm older, I'm a Gen X, and this is the late 80s. So date rape wasn't even really a thing yet. Like people thought rape is when it's someone you don't know in a dark alley, when the reality is that most of rape is someone you do know. And now we know that. But at the time, that wasn't known. So that's how far it went with me, this not being able to set boundaries and not being able to say no. And it is because of what my mother did to me. It really is. And then my father not being willing to protect me,
So was your
So
father, and I don't know the proper term, so please, share the proper term, but was your father like the doormat?
yeah, I would say he's very passive. I kind of liken it to the story of Cinderella with the terrible stepmother. So she would be the mother, the kind of more overtly emotionally abusive. But where was the father in Cinderella,
Honestly,
right?
I
Like,
don't remember the father. Was there?
yeah.
Where was the
Like what
father?
did he do to protect her? How did he help her? And that's kind of like my father. So he was sort of there in body, but he didn't do anything to protect me. He was kind of like the paycheck that just sort of provided. And I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful that he was there to provide, but he only provided kind of materially in a very minimal way because we didn't have a lot of resources and there was really no emotional support whatsoever.
Now, did you, as child, teen, as an adult, normally what I've noticed, and you and I have like weirdly similar stories, like, wow, which I always say, like attracts like, the universe
Yeah.
called me to you, you to me. That's so cool when
Yeah.
that happens. And my focus even in therapy and in healing, or even when I was like a teen and like complaining to my friends and venting about my fucked up mom and stuff like that, never was the focus on pops. Never was like, I didn't see that passiveness as a form of neglect or abuse, which it is, but I didn't see it as that.
Yeah.
Can you relate to that at all?
Totally. And I think a lot of that too is because emotional neglect wasn't really even acknowledged until very, very recently.
Literally, like now, basically.
Yes. Yeah. I think Dr. Janice Webb is kind of the champion of that. She's sort of the lead researcher on that. But childhood emotional neglect is just as damaging as abuse. And in fact, it is a form of abuse. Right. And it is so much more insidious because what did they do? It's not what they did, it's what they did not do. And how do you explain that what someone did not do to you is what hurt you? You know, and that's a tough one.
Yeah, especially when you have the one parent who's chaos, basically, is so loud and takes up so much like space, right? It's like the focus goes on that person and not on the other person until that comes up. So in your career, in your work life, how did the family dysfunction play out with like bosses or coworkers, or when you were told like you did something wrong at work?
Yes. Oh my goodness. So because I was really afraid of my mother, I did my very best to stay under the radar. I was very quiet, very people pleasing, like I said. And so how that played out at work is that I was always doing jobs below my abilities and that did not use my talents because I didn't have the courage to put up my hand for things. First of all, for things that were scary. And the only way to grow and advance in a career or in life is to do things that scare you, right? Because that's how you grow. But I never learned that. I never learned that you should do scary things to help you grow and you should take on challenges. That did not occur to me. All that is what I was trying to avoid.
Exactly. Right? It's like, that's the last thing I wanted to do.
That's right. So in meetings, never talking, even though I would have great ideas in my head. And then even the ideas I had in my head, like the boss would say that idea and I'd be like, why didn't I say that? But I just couldn't. I just didn't have my voice, you know? So I was definitely doing things that were far below my abilities just because I didn't have the courage to ask for more.
And that kept you in some way, that obviously kept you safe because you were doing something that you were also preventing someone from saying you're not doing a good job because you knew you were overqualified for it.
Yes, exactly. And also, when you get promoted, you might know this if you've been promoted in the workplace, not everybody likes it. There is courage required to take on a promotion because somebody else didn't get the promotion. People are going to be jealous of you. There's all these things that go along with getting a promotion that I could not have handled. Like there is no way that I could have withstood somebody not liking me or somebody resenting me for getting a promotion. Like I didn't have that in me. There's no possible way at the time that I could have. And also, I didn't have anyone to tell me to expect those things. That if you get promoted, not everyone's going to like it, you know.
And like it's normal and it's not you. And
exactly.
You know what came to my mind? Because I know that you have a book coming out. I mean, like you guys, she's like a legit author, like a published. She's just legit. So you have a book coming out. What I thought of is I have a resistance and I'm doing a lot of work on it, on being seen at a even bigger level. And that might sound weird to you or listeners because they're like, Tiff, you already are your TV newscaster. I'm talking though, like on a much, almost like a public figure type level, like taking it to that level. And I'm thinking the correlation between being seen and visible and standing out and the promotion. Because I have a lot of entrepreneurs that listen to the show. people who want to grow an Instagram account and put their wisdom out there like you have on yours. But that's being visible. And the more visible you are, it is true. You are more open and susceptible to having people say stuff to you that doesn't feel good.
Yes.
So how were you
Absolutely.
able to do that? Did any of that come up for you in building your personal brand?
It did, yes, because you once in a while get the comments that are not complimentary. And they used to scare me. Like once in a while, and these are rare, but once in a while, I would get a comment from a therapist. So if I posted something that kind of said, I did therapy for years and it didn't help me, I don't have to say that I don't mean that all therapists are bad. Of course I don't, but I wasn't getting the right kind of therapy. And I remember early on getting a DM from a therapist who kind of said, what's your qualification or what's your license or whatever? And I was terrified because the fear is always that I'm going to get in trouble. Like, I can't post about mental health because I don't have a PhD. I'm going to get in trouble. Like, she's going to report me to the police or the Instagram police or whoever. And it's just this fear that again goes back to childhood, that I'm going to get in trouble for speaking out. And I think that might be why some people get so many letters after their name, and not always. Like, letters after your name are great and we work very hard for them. And I respect that a lot. And I'm not taking that away from anyone. But sometimes I think stacking those letters after your name just make you feel like you have the right to take up that space, you know? Whereas someone like me who only has BA after her name doesn't feel as confident. And I definitely felt that fear of being exposed, even though now I know it's absolutely my right to talk about the things that I've been through and to talk about the things I've learned about mental health through my research. And I can borrow the research of PhDs who have done that work and talk about it. So that was something that I've become more comfortable with, is being criticized. But just like you said, that's why we don't get everything at once, because you go to the next level and then you get used to that level of criticism, and then you're kind of acclimatized to that. And then you go to the next level. You get stronger. It's like those challenges I was talking about that I used to avoid. Now I welcome them because it really does build your muscles, and it's awesome.
I started having, and this is like in the last month that I'm doing this work, because what I've noticed is I will do things to 90%. So even back when I was in the pharmaceutical industry, I would do 90%. I wouldn't do that next 10% where I would be like tops of the tops, the most visible, but I'd still be top. Very clever of me subconsciously, right? And same as a TV newscaster. And then I had an awareness through doing incredible work with a coach, not a therapist. I have a therapist too, but it's very fucking different. As for you guys who don't know, and those of you who are coaches, have both. Like, I have both, right? And what happened is I was like, oh my God, I'm doing that. It's like I'm holding back. I'm in resistance of super shining. I'll shine just enough because the narcissist, I had to shine. I don't know if you'll relate to this. I could shine because she needed me to shine, because it's a reflection of her parenting, right? But you damn better not outshine me or you're dead.
Yeah.
You got to shine just enough. Be just pretty enough. But anything I stepped over that, woo.
Yeah. Yeah, I heard when you first said about doing 90%, I kind of thought that's the good girl in you, right? Like, you're being a good girl, but not too good. I get that.
Yeah, and like I am fascinated, and my mad respect to you for putting yourself out there and being seen at this level, because I'm sure in your nervous system, in your body, there are times where you're triggered or you're in a trauma response where you're like, I need to shut all this down and quit and run away.
Yeah. And then also the job for me has become to have the wisdom, when do I respond? Like as a professional, when do I respond and when do I let it go? Or how much do I say? Because I don't want to not respond out of fear. And I think I'm giving myself the answer there. It kind of is the reason why, what's the motivation behind it? So I don't want to not respond out of fear, but I also don't want to have the knee-jerk response, the emotionally dysregulated response. So it's a great way to practice that too, to practice responding in a healthy way and in a professional way. This is a professional social media account, and I can't just go on there and say whatever I feel like saying. Responsibility to people.
Yeah. How did you get to this spot to where you were not worried about what other people thought of you, whether it be the people who have the PhD, whether it be family members, people you went to college with? How did you get to that point where you did it anyway?
Yeah, that's a great question. I really think it was just by doing it. And I think it was also in doing the work, I got to know a lot of PhDs who were very supportive. And I got to know a lot of PhDs who were doing this work for the same reason I was. And so I lost that intimidation and I see them as peers now. And I now don't see a level of education as making someone better than me, although it is something I admire because it is a hell of a lot of hard work. And the research that PhDs have done in the field of psychology and mental health has helped me tremendously. So I'm not afraid of them anymore. I see them more as peers and people that I'm grateful to.
So switching over to your relationship side of your life, friendships and romantic relationships, how did your family dysfunction play out? Because I think by you sharing and me sharing how it played out, people listening can go, oh, that makes so much sense now why I married him or why I stayed or why I selected this person over and over and over again.
Yeah. Yeah. They say that we choose people because we're trying to work out the trauma that we went to. We're kind of recreating it so we can get it right this time. That's one of the theories. And I know I was in a long marriage. I was married for 11 years and with that man for 7 years prior to that. And we met when I was 19. So that was like my whole
Oh my
adult
God.
life.
I heard part of the story, but I didn't know you were 19. Oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah. And we were together for, from age 19 to I guess like 37 or something like that when we finally got divorced. But I realize now he was the classic avoidant. And I am the hero of his family, which is the one who brings.
Go ahead. I want people to know what avoidant is and hero is. Go ahead.
Yeah. So avoidant attachment comes from childhood in which your needs were not met and they were probably never met. Whereas an anxious attachment, I think it was more, sometimes they were met, sometimes they weren't. Whereas an avoidant, pretty much your needs were never met. And I know in his family, his mother was very codependent with him. And he was like the little spouse who had to always take care of his mother. And the father was very detached and that kind of thing. And so even though he didn't really like or respect his mother, he was very codependent with her. And so she came before me. She and his family and pleasing them came before me. And at that time, because of my messed up family, I had what I call the fearful avoidant, or it could be called disorganized attachment. And that's the one that's only found in 5% of people. And you have to be in a really messed up family to have it. Like we're talking addiction, mental illness, like you have to have everything thrown at you to come out with this. And the way I describe it is I came out of my household like a feral cat. Like I was afraid of everything. I was just literally in survival mode all the time. Like you said, the hypervigilance that you talked about, that was my mode. My nervous system was completely shot. And that's why I drank. And that's why I ended up with my husband too, because the fearful attachment has the anxious and the avoidant. They're both going on at the same time. So it's kind of like the come here, go away. I love you, come here. And then you push them away. I was doing all of that. So he and I came together for whatever reason, and it was quite dysfunctional from the very beginning. And so the anxious part of my attachment style was desperately trying to get his attention all the time, very emotionally dysregulated. But then there were other times where I would kind of push him away, right? And then he, with his avoidance style, was always pushing me away, which kind of fed into my fears of not being lovable and not being good enough and all that kind of stuff. So unfortunately, we were never able to resolve our problems within that marriage. And so that marriage ended. But very soon after that marriage ended, I started doing this work. I got sober. I started doing this work, and I found out why I felt the way I did, why I was acting the way I did, and why he was acting the way he was. And I really see how the family that he grew up in fed into who he became and why he was really not capable of giving me what I needed emotionally. And I have a lot of sympathy for him now, and sympathy for myself too. And I have a lot of forgiveness for both of us for not having the tools we needed to make that work, and for not at all having the support of either of our families. In fact, both of those families got in the way of that marriage ever working more than anything else.
Do you feel that an avoidant personality type, and it sounds like your dad was also an avoidant?
Yes, 100%.
So do you feel that personality type, because of them being so avoidant, or they keep everyone, I look at it like they keep everyone at like an arm's length, basically all the time. I've never heard of that level of an avoidant actually like getting help and really working through it and transitioning out of it.
Yeah. And I think the reason for that, is the pain. I think the level of pain that they consciously feel is less, because whereas an anxiously attached person feels pain almost all the time, they always feel like they're not getting what they want. They always feel not good enough. They feel abandoned and rejected all the time. But an avoidant, especially in our culture, there's a lot of reward. They're independent. They actually have quite high confidence. Avoidant people feel good about themselves because they don't need anybody. Those needy people, how sad is that? And even in dating, you find that it seems sometimes like the person who cares the least is the winner,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where the avoidant is operating from. And they can do quite well in business. They can
because they can have that, take it, especially in like sales or as an entrepreneur. It's like, oh, well, if you don't want to pay me and be my client, whatever, take it or leave it. It's like an automatic detachment from the outcome.
Yes, because there is a certain amount of detachment that's useful in business, right? And they have that in spades. My ex did very well in business. He built a very, very, I think, $1 million business. So he did very well. And there are rewards to being an avoidant that the other attachment styles don't share. So I think that's what compels people who are not avoidant, who are anxious or disorganized. I think it's the pain of it that propels them to get help. And also avoidance, they do keep people at arm's length, but they have friendships and they get married like mine did, and they have relationships, but it's the intimacy that's missing. They might have what looks like a close friendship. They might have friendships that have gone on their whole lives, but the true intimacy is missing.
The depth. There's no depth.
That's it. That's exactly it. If you try to talk about real emotions with someone like this, they'll shut you down.
Oh yeah, and in a variety of ways. And if you're like me, where you're like a dog on a bone and you keep pushing it and pushing them and trying to manage, mother, and manipulate, like doing whatever it takes to try to get them to engage, they can even snap. They can even become verbally abusive, emotionally abusive, microaggressions, like saying you're so sensitive or you're so dramatic or God, you're always like, you talk too much. And in order to shut you down, like when you're really tapping, I'm poking the bear on that like intimacy thing, right?
Yes, that's a great analogy to say poking the bear, because that's what my ex was like. He would be cool, but if I pushed him too far, he would kind of snap. And that's how they protect themselves, that pushing people away. That's how they protect themselves, because they're terrified of those emotions. And I think it has a lot to do with, as children, emotions were not scary, but burdensome to them, because they might have had a mother like my ex does, who just like, what's the word? Burden. I'm looking for another word for burden, but just kind of vomited their emotions onto them all the time. So they don't want your emotions.
It was exhausting. It was exhausting to them.
Exactly.
It was a lot. It was too much.
Yeah, that's right. So as not to feel that burden, they protect themselves by keeping you away.
What do you think when you look back, what was attractive to you about him? What about that dysfunctional personality type was like a moth to a flame for you?
Yeah, I think now that I look back on it, at the time I couldn't have really told you, but looking back on it, I think it gave me the feeling of home. So that feeling of trying to win someone's love and never really getting it, that felt very familiar to me. So I honestly think that was it. That was a big part of it, because I didn't really have the feeling of being in love with him. It just felt very comfortable between us. And I think that could have been the trauma bond. It just felt like home.
It's familiar, even if because the dysfunction is familiar for those of us who grew up in that way. It's not a red flag. It's just
exactly.
In fact, it can even be a green flag. Like, right. We lean into it. How did you get up? I don't know the right word, the courage to end this marriage where this was not working for you anymore after all this time from knowing this person since you were 19 years old?
Yeah, it took a lot. And it took a lot because I was so wanting to, I made my bed, so I had to lie in it. That's what I thought. Like, I can remember after a family get together where, again, I just felt so disconnected, so disrespected, so not seen. It was so fake. It was so nothing, no depth, as you said. And I can remember thinking, like, just 10 more years and then my kids will be adults and then I'll be free. That's how I thought. I was in this prison of my own mind. And I even, long before we broke up in 2010 and around 2006, 7, I was suicidal. Like, I was having suicidal thoughts. And even that was not enough to make me leave. And there came a moment, and it reminds me of the scene in, I don't know if you've read Eat, Pray, Love at all.
Oh, yeah. And watched the movie. Yeah.
Right. So her moment was when she just realized she was never going to get her needs met, and she ended up kind of on the floor of her bathroom. And I had a moment like that on the floor of my walk-in closet, because we had this big house because he became so successful, right? I was on the floor of my walk-in closet and just finally admitting that my needs are never going to get met here and I'm going to die. And if it's not a physical death, it's going to be an emotional death, and I just had to save myself. And that was it. And ironically, that still did not make me actually say the words or ask to get out. He was the one who did it.
I'm
was like
shocked that he did it as an avoidant.
Yeah.
I'm blown away. That was God or the universe.
I am too, because it was the first non-passive thing he had kind of ever done with me. And when he did it, I should have said yes, but I said no, because I thought about all that we had built together. And all the things I thought about were like the money, the families that we knew, the people we went to the cottage with, like all these really unimportant things that were all about kind of my image in the community and things like that. That's what I didn't want to let go of. And so eventually, and you know how surprised you are that as an avoidant, he did that. I think he might have been doing it just to get a reaction or to kind of put the ball in my court or something like that, because we ended up going to counseling and he sort of reversed, like he kind of capitulated and he started to say he wanted to work on it. And so then it became me who was asking
you're the
quote
unquote now bad guy. You're the disruptor.
Yeah, that's it. And I believe that's what happened. I don't know for sure because I don't know what's going on in his mind, but it felt like that's what happened. I was definitely put into the role of the scapegoat in that situation. And I became the scapegoat in both of our families too for that, because then I became the one who physically left.
Right. You're the one who left. She left. Laura left. Yeah. She broke off the marriage. Right.
And then he could keep his image intact.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. That makes so much sense. What I notice in myself and the thousands and thousands of people I've coached, and I'm sure you've noticed this too, is adults who came from dysfunctional families. We tend to suppress our needs, minimize our needs, dismiss our needs. Maybe I ask for too much, and maybe this job isn't so bad. Like I should just be grateful I have a 6-figure job, even though I'm exhausted and it doesn't really fulfill me. But there's people who like would die to have this job and have all this sort of chatter in our minds to really minimize our desires. And then we end up staying in relationships, friendships, careers long past the expiration date. Have you noticed this yourself as a coach?
I have, yeah. And I would say that the fortitude it takes to get to a 6-figure income as a woman, because I have respect for that, because it does take a lot. And I think that work ethic, even when you don't like the job, like you said, you're grateful to have it. You feel like you should do it. It's kind of what you've always wanted, maybe, even if you don't want it now. That kind of same work ethic towards something that you don't really want is the same thing we put into the relationship. It's like, we're going to make it work. If we just work hard enough, we can make it work. So it's the same kind of thing going on, because we're really strong people, but sometimes we use that strength for things that are not the best for us, right? And I think that can happen at work and in the relationship.
What would you say are some clues, red flags, whatever term you want to use, or even questions for people to take a look at to see if there's some dysfunction occurring in their life that maybe they need to wake up to?
Yeah, when you say that, I think a really easy one is to look at your life and see, what am I doing? Who am I seeing? And am I doing more of what I like than what I don't like? That's a really easy one, because if you have poor boundaries, you're probably doing more things that you don't like out of obligation. And just how much joy is in your life, how much of your calendar is made up doing things that bring you pleasure and joy. And if it's out of whack, if you're doing more stuff you don't like, that is a huge red flag.
And you have a quiz, right, that people can take. And what does this quiz help It's a free quiz. But what does this quiz help people determine?
Yeah, so this is the dysfunctional family roles quiz. So if you have grown up in a dysfunctional family, it's likely that you've been put into one of these 5 roles totally against your will. And it's possible that you've played more than one of these roles at different times or even at the same time. So you can just go and answer the questions honestly based on your experience, and you can find out which of these roles that you've played if you grew up in a dysfunctional family. And then it'll have a little explanation and then a little what you can do.
Yeah, and then you can start researching and looking up those roles that come up and really learn about it. And what I love that you said is this not only creates like amazing validation, mind-blowing validation, like I said at the top of the show, but it also does allow for forgiveness of the other person and yourself, or at least compassion first. It helps you because you go, it makes so much sense. And I'm not saying to excuse one's behavior, but it's not as personal. It takes some of that. It does take some of that sting away.
It does. And it helps you see that you're not alone, because if there's enough research on this stuff that they've come up with these different roles, then obviously a lot of us are going through the same thing, right? There are a lot of dysfunctional families out there and a lot of us playing these roles. So you are definitely not alone. And if that's the first thing that you get from it, that's huge too.
Yeah, I mean, her Instagram, Laura, Laurak, Connell, everything's going to be linked in the show notes. So you can swipe up, get the quiz, go to her Instagram. But I mean, you wouldn't have over 56,000 people following you and a publishing house wanting you to write a book if this wasn't a very hot topic that millions of people resonate with. And that in of itself is validating.
Yeah, it really is, because it's quite recent that we've even been able to say it's because of what happened to me in childhood that I have these adult self-sabotaging tendencies, because it used to be that was in the past. Why aren't you over that yet? But we find now that it's even stored in our bodies. It's in our subconscious. It's the kind of stuff that we can't help. We don't even realize why we're doing it. So yeah, getting that insight and, like you said, that validation really helps us do the work to change.
This is why we can't do this stuff alone, because it's so buried. We can't see what we can't see. Just like I say, even about your business, you can't see your own holes in your business. You're too close to it. You can't see all of your own stuff. Yes, some of it, but you can't see the dynamics. You can't see all of it. It's not possible. That's why we need incredible coaches in our life. And I so appreciate you coming on and sharing your wisdom. All the ways to work with Laura K. Connell are in her Instagram bio. So check her out if this is something that, you want more help with and want to go deeper on for yourself, for your life, for your family. She's incredible. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. It's been such a pleasure. I'm so glad we got connected.
Me too.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please write a 5-star review on iTunes. Not only will this make me super happy, but it will allow more listeners to find our special show. Simply help me help others.